Is the school generous, kind, good, and full of Christian love? Is it cheerful? Is it communal? Are the parents welcomed?
Yeah.
We know this from Scripture as well, because Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 13, it's the most important thing. It's the most excellent way. If you have the best curriculum, teaching the best literature, but have not love, you will fail, and rightly so.
Yeah.
You're a clanging gong. Our schools have to be good in that sense, good in that they're filled with the love of Christ and the love of neighbor. And when a parent walks into a school like Trinity and sees that embodied, she'll sign up.
As Christians, we know we're called to live lives that are different from the world around us. This isn't aimless, but purposeful. And as parents, we know this to be true for our children and our approach to education as well. So how do we do this? How can we be thoughtfully and intentionally different in education, parenting, community, and culture? Welcome to Different by Design. Well, welcome to Different by Design. I'm your host, Matt Dixon, and today we have a special treat because I'm going to have a double interview, and we'll be interviewing our founder and head of school, Liz Caddo, who, just by way of bio, in case you weren't aware, has been head of school for 25 years. This is our 25th year as a school, and so obviously you have learned a few things along the way and continue to learn. Right?
Yes.
But in addition, we're also excited to welcome Dr. Chris Perrin, who's been a host on our other podcast, the Classical Academy podcast. But Dr. Perrin is an author, educator, and speaker who specializes specifically in classical education. He is committed to the renewal of the liberal arts tradition, and maybe today we might get into what does that even mean. But he is now serves full-time as the CEO and publisher at Classical Academic Press, which is a classical education curriculum, media, and consulting company. So you have some thoughts on classical education, all that to say. You've thought about these things. So all that to say, thank you both. Thank you for this time. Looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Perrin, for being with us, Chris. This is wonderful. And Chris was just with us for our Inspiration Day.
Yeah, not too long ago.
In January with faculty and staff. And that was a blessing to have you speak life into all that we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure several times to visit your school. It's full of enthusiasm and inspiration, and I would say a measure of joy. So I'm glad to be on this podcast with you today, and love, of course, talking about classical education.
Yeah. Well, I think even the recent training you did with our faculty and staff was somewhat the impetus of having this conversation and really looking at, well, afresh. If you've been a part of classical education for a year or 25 years, or maybe it's just the first time you're really hearing about it, I think it's important to take a step back and look at some of those essentials, look at some of those basics, especially if you're just exploring, whether that's for a family here at Trinity, or maybe you're looking at a place like Trinity, or you're looking at pursuing classical Christian education for your child. This conversation's for you, and I hope it's one that's helpful. So let's start at the very beginning.
Oh, no.
Which is always, it's a good place to start. So if you were going to give, we could maybe do both a short and long answer for both of you. But if someone came to you and just said, what is classical Christian education? I've heard of it, I've heard maybe these words, but you've been in it a while. What is classical Christian education? How would you answer that?
It's, of course, a really important question. It's a difficult question to answer kind of in the abstract because it depends on the person who's in front of you. But typically what we're thinking of is someone new to classical Christian education who's heard about it, maybe knows a little bit about it, but is wondering and would like a clear description or definition of it, because they're trying to sort out, say, a mom looking at a school for her children, trying to sort out what would be a good pathway, a good educational pathway for her children. So when I think of that person, I nonetheless want to get to know that person a little bit. That might not be the first thing I'd want to talk about when I meet somebody. Hi, I'm interested in your school. What is classical education?
Yeah, maybe not.
It might be top of mind for that mom coming into a school. So it's going to come up, and it probably will come up sooner. And we need to have some thoughtful answers. But I usually like to think of it in terms of coming into a restaurant, a nice restaurant. You're greeted by a maitre d' or a host, and then you're seated at a table, and then a server comes to you, and then there's some discussion about the menu. It's a conversation that needs an introduction, a middle, and maybe then a conclusion. So I like to think of it as a conversation, not just soundbite dictionary definitions.
Yeah.
Or to reverse the metaphor, I think about it like the tip of the iceberg. You start with something high, and that's maybe more general. You can't explain it all at once. If you do, you just kind of, steam will start coming out of your ears because education is a complex matter.
Yeah.
It involves parents, children, our Christian faith, a tradition, history, curriculum, pedagogy, teachers, fellow classmates, partnerships, facility, tuition, a readiness for a life to come. Which of those 10 things I just rattled off do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Education should be a preparation and touch on all of those things. So it's a multi-braided rope. It's like coming into a museum in which there are many rooms, and you can talk about any one of the rooms in that museum. And so what I often end up doing, I'm going to give you a little pithy definition in a moment, but you can see that something complex requires time and a conversation. Something complex requires analogies or metaphors because you cannot describe it kind of with scientific prose easily. So I quickly go to metaphors and analogies, and I'll say it's like this. And I use the language of museum. It's like coming into a beautiful museum, a museum that contains things old and some things new. There's a parable where Christ says that the kingdom of God is like that, like a chest that you open up where there are treasures, old and new. So it's a treasure chest. It is a museum. And when we come into it, we begin to realize that we can explore many things about it. But that doesn't really answer the question the typical mom has when she's visiting the school. If you go too quickly to the metaphor,
she might look at you weird.
It's like a museum.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like a feast at a long table, and at that table, there's Augustine, there's C.S. Lewis, there's Tolkien, there's Jonathan Edwards, there's Martin Luther. They're all there. Dante is there. And she'll be thinking, I'm not sure.
I don't think I signed up for a feast. Like I don't. Yeah.
Right. Now we're talking about the menu, right? And we're doing a deep dive into the menu. But at first, you kind of want to know what is the restaurant. And if you were looking for a good restaurant, you might ask me, "Oh, there's this restaurant called Dante's." You might ask me, "What's it like? Do you like it? Would you recommend it?" And if we're passing in the hallway, it can't be a long conversation. I know it can't be a long conversation. So I have to have something pithy, summary in mind to share with you. So I might say something like this. Look, Dante specializes in Italian food, but they subspecialize in carbonara. And if you go to Dante's, you go for the carbonara. And then I walk by. And then you want to know more, right? You probably we'll talk more. Well, tell me about the carbonara, et cetera. So usually what I'll say is something like this, knowing that hopefully we'll be talking about the menu. I'll say something like, classical education is an enduring, excellent form of education that's been passed down to us by many preceding generations. It's the best education for educating human beings under the lordship of Christ to serve and love God and neighbor. And it involves a traditional curriculum of the liberal arts that are liberating to set us free to do anything that humans do with word and number. And the great books and the great literature that are a crude treasury of wisdom that we can then access by studying these liberal arts to grow wise and virtuous and even holy. And we are seeking to form students so that they would be wise, virtuous, and holy, and prepared for any good work. And what we used to call classical education before 1890 was simply education. We're trying to recover what education was once almost universally understood to be.
Yeah.
And I'll stop there.
Yeah.
And usually, I've rattled off a few things, and then, the parent usually has some questions, and then we slowly, because I've kind of given them an overview, mentioned some of the menu items.
Yeah.
And then she might say, well, I really want to hear about the curriculum. She could pick one of those 6 or 7 things that I kind of referenced. And then we're having a conversation. We're going down below the water. We've hit the tip of the iceberg, and now we're going underneath.
Yeah.
And from there, I would probably use metaphors. I would talk about the table. I would talk about the museum. I would talk about what a tradition is, something handed down. I might use the analogy of the cathedral, and I might use the language of the tree growing. And then with each of these analogies, it suggests a certain role that the teacher plays from time to time. If we're in the museum, well, then the teacher is like a muse who inspires, because that's what's at the root of the word museum, muse and music and inspiration. If we're talking about a tree, the teacher is like an arborist or a gardener. If we're talking about tradition, the teacher is like an initiator and a guide. And if we're talking about the cathedral, the teacher at times is like a pastor, a shepherd. And if we talk about the table, the teacher is like a host. And I think all of these those words can be instructive to help a new mom understand the kind of the role that the faculty has too. I'll stop there. I mean, you can see I like talking about this, and I could go on far too long with a single prompt.
Well, Liz, from your perspective, because I know you get this answer all the time, and I know I actually think this is very helpful. You will not say it in the same way as Chris, but
certainly not. But that was absolutely beautiful, Chris, and very eloquent.
But you have to, on a practical level, answer this question too for a family who's wondering about classical education for a place like Trinity. And what would you say? How would you describe it? What would you explain it? Sitting where you sit now, again, having lived it and watched it and seen students and seen families walk through this type of education, what is a classical Christian education?
Yes. Well, something that we have just come to embrace and say a lot is that we believe a classical Christian education is an education for life. Teaching our children how to learn and how to think, and shaping them for their future success, for whatever's ahead, for whatever the Lord might call them to, and how this integration of faith and learning. And of course, we embody, as it relates to our mission, and that it would raise up a generation that seeks and knows virtue, wisdom, lives purposely and courageously. We talk a lot about this type of education being transforming for them and their life, for their soul, for their being. And we also will say how that it helps them think well, read well, write well, speak well, know what they believe and why they believe it. As I talk to a kindergarten mom or an older parent in regards to where their child is at, most of who we serve, myself included when I was a parent, I did not receive this type of education. And so all of us come to the table that you speak about, hungry. Hungry for the feast, wishing we had this for ourselves, but feel grateful to be blessed to give it to our own children, but then others as well. And the Lord's been able to do that through what he's done through our school. In our conversations reference, it was really how children were taught for centuries, and it's only modern education that has really deconstructed what it means to be a learned person now, and in so many ways, how we go about that. So we hope then, as we invite them, like you were saying, to the table, and we invite parents to the table as well, because really, if we're embarking on this, in this classical Christian education, it really is for the whole family. And I actually just had a conversation with a parent in drop-off, oddly. And, you just never know the conversations that you're going to have on a given day. And this parent said, we were just having a quick conversation. He goes, this place, this education is changing my children. My children are different. My family's changed. Mm-hmm. So that's, these kinds of things are hard to put, like classical Christian education. Yes, we could put it in a
soundbite,
put it in a brochure or something written or whatever, but it really is something that is to be experienced, obviously. And I know for myself, when I was trying to understand how would we start the school, or what would we do, like when we were going to try to do a school, and I came across this whole classical model, I always say it was like stepping into the wardrobe, and C.S. Lewis's Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and stepping out into this Narnia, this whole other world of what learning could be like. And I'm like, this is it. This is how every child needs to be educated generationally. So that
was well said.
I guess how I would say it.
That was well said.
No,
it was well said.
You're touching on something that particularly the new parent, usually a mother, is most concerned about when they walk into a school. They're most concerned not about the particulars of the pedagogy or the particulars of the curriculum. It's rare that you have a parent, but you have some of them, who will come in with their 5-year-old in tow and say, tell me what Latin curriculum you use and how many years do you study it. What they're interested in first, they may have that interest as a secondary or a tertiary interest, or that interest might grow as they begin to see the great value of, say, studying a language like Latin for so many reasons. And that can be a conversation that you have at the table with the server about the menu, right? Someone may say, I really want to talk about your language curriculum. Great, we can go there, and we can go deep with that and talk about its value and talk about how it's related to the larger enterprise of the school, because Latin is the DNA of the West. Yes, we could do that. But her first concern is usually something that you were just touching on, Liz. Is this school generous, kind, good, and full of Christian love? Is it cheerful? Is it communal? Are the parents welcomed? Do the students have great friendships, good friendships with fellow students and with their teachers?
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. And we know this from Scripture as well, because Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 13, it's the most important thing. It's the most excellent way. If you have the best curriculum, teaching the best literature, with the best pedagogies, but have not love, you will fail, and rightly so. Paul says if you can fathom all mysteries, have great knowledge, and speak in the tongues of Latin and Greek or angels, and have not love, you're a clanging gong. So our schools have to be good in that sense, good in that they're filled with the love of Christ and the love of neighbor. And when a parent walks into a school like Trinity and sees that embodied, she'll sign up.
Yeah.
And then later she'll learn about the value of studying grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and poetry, and literature. And so I think this is always a temptation for us, that sometimes our own success and our own enthusiasm for the secondary things can occlude or cloud the primary thing, which is the love of Christ and the love of neighbor. So that's just my little testimony. Like when I was head of school, I was so excited about recovering grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the great books and great literature and natural science and pedagogy. And of course, we needed to do that, and it was something that had been forgotten. But in so doing, it's easy to just forget love. So when I go to Trinity, and I've been there probably 4 or 5 times, that's one of the things I notice, is that there's just a community of people who love each other. So I think it's important to say that to Christian parents coming into a school like Trinity Classical, Christ is honored here, and we love each other, and that is job number one.
Yeah.
And then they see it. Like one time I was taking a young mother through the school in Harrisburg that I was leading at the time, and I had already had the talk with her about the classical curriculum and all of that. But after she spent an hour and a half or so walking through the school, sitting in some classes, she said this to me. She'd seen the website, she'd read the materials, but she said, I didn't know that this is what I was looking for. But this is what I'm looking for. And what she was responding to was the embodiment of good community, cheerful teachers, Christian love, safe place, good children who appeared to love their teacher and love one another. That's why she wanted to sign up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I always think of it in the context. I always tell families when they're visiting, whether it's an open house or anything like that. Obviously, we're grateful for the curriculum and the tradition that we're a part of. But I think, Chris, to your point, my encouragement to them is I say, as you're looking at schools, because I know any wise, thoughtful parent is looking at multiple schools and multiple options. I always tell them, make sure you look at the living curriculum. Because especially for me, as I sit as a principal of grammar school, when you're looking at for those younger years, and I think this very much carries into as students age and mature as well. But when I think back, when I was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, I could tell you every teacher's name, right? K1. I could tell you, did they love Jesus? Did they love me? Did they love learning? Right? Were those foundational pieces in who they are? So I say, look for the living curriculum, look for the people, and ask yourself as a parent, do I want my child to become like these people? Because if the answer is no, there's your answer. And if the answer is yes, that might be your answer too. But either way, their daughter in kindergarten, they'll come home and they'll hear some stuff. They'll hear some math, and they'll hear probably about some of the stories they read, right? Those will be memorable things. But the most memorable thing, I think, by far, will be that teacher and who they shape them to be. And again, it's not even something you could always put on a list, right? It's not always here are the features, here's what you're buying. It's that person, because they're going to say, well, as Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. So they're going to say, follow me as I follow Christ, and I'm going to do it imperfectly. But those are things that will stick with them, and obviously other things too. But I think one of the most foundational things in kind of everything that you guys are saying is it's the community and it's the people, and it's a passing along of, this is what it means to be an educated person. This is what it means to love one another. And ultimately, this is what it means to follow Christ. So do it. I'm a sign, right? I'm a billboard that's really just pointing you to our Savior. But in both of what you're saying, I think what's interesting is it's that classic, like, in order to go forward, you have to go back, right? When someone says, what is classical Christian education? You're having to unravel some assumptions. You're having to almost... And yeah, as you said, it's a conversation, all those things. But you're having to kind of go back. And so I think another maybe helpful way of looking at it, of what I'm curious what you guys would say to this is, what is the goal or what is the outcome of a classical Christian education? What's the end result? What's the product, if you will? You know what I mean? What have you seen? It's like what?
Yes.
What? Not only what do we hope for, but what are we aiming for? But what have we seen and experienced?
Yes. Well, we were just speaking to this the other night related to what we had called our vision night, where we just take time to share with our community some of what our students are doing, what we hope to continue to do in this pursuit together in our partnership. And, we speak to, right, the good life and what that means. And, what does that mean to live the good life? And one of the things I was even saying to our parents that evening is our parents are here and being a part of our community as they see what we're doing or see what our students are doing or even our alumni, they want to live the good life. And to mean that means a life of virtue first in order for one to be happy. And then in that, living out of what God calls us to, being in community, serving him, all of that. And so in helping children learn, like you were saying, the basics and the skills and the logic and the rhetoric and all those things. Well, it's a mystery how it all ties together, but it does. Yes, we're going to do all those things, but in the end, it's about who they become and what Christ will call them to, because he's calling us all to something. He has a plan for each of us that's different, but it's the same. How do we help embody that as a community for them so our children can see that and then want to go do that? And modern education, it doesn't even speak to these truths anymore, or the things that we know on some level infuse our hearts and minds and souls that make life good, which is the things that you're just talking about.
You're describing in your own context traditional ends of a classical and classical Christian education, which is the formation of a human being made in the image and likeness of God, who under the lordship of Christ in faith is made to be like Christ. But to be like Christ also means to be fully human. There's that famous phrase that's often quoted from the Gospels when Christ is before Pilate, and in the Latin it's behold the man, or ecce homo. Christ is the ideal human, God become flesh. So to be fully human as a Christian means to be like Christ. But it's a kind of Christian humanism, you might say, properly understood. The humanism can also mean something bad. But a Christian humanism means being like Jesus Christ, who is the perfect man. And you're just describing that. And people who have, we've received as a tradition this curriculum of the liberal arts, which are rooted in creation, by the way, in my view. Why do we study mathematics? Why do we study number and word? Why do we study word and number? Because we're made in the image and likeness of God. So this means even someone outside of the faith, who's a human being, will use word and number because that person is made in the image and likeness of God. And the mathematical arts and the verbal arts enable us to do as human beings what our animals cannot do, and call us to then seek to understand and steward and properly reign over the earth, the cultural mandate from Genesis. That's why we have the liberal arts. And the liberal arts would call you as a Christian to serve the church, to serve neighbor, to serve your family.
Yeah. So
it's this idea of a person being formed, and so a lot of classical Christian schools have developed these portrait of a graduate. You start to it's a bit of an idealistic exercise, right? Like, what would we hope that a 12th grader graduating from Trinity would be like? And you describe it, and I bet it's along the lines of what you just did.
We have one as of a year ago.
Yes.
Can I test? Do you know it?
That we would know.
Yeah, so we do ask our students every week.
Are you joking about the testing part?
No,
right now?
I am not joking.
Well, and we do. We ask them every week at our catechism.
Yeah, we sing the doxology.
Yes.
But one of the questions we ask is, what does Trinity hope for its students? It's that very question. Because we want to give them an ideal. And Liz, what is the answer?
Okay, yes.
That we would know that life is a gift from God, and lasting joy is found in service to Him. Also, that we would grow to become men and women who love God and His people rightly, seeking to live our lives to impact His kingdom for eternal purposes.
When you were talking to, and you were saying the fully human part, And in this journey with families, well, and also for us, for the grown-ups involved, like this whole journey is just one big fat process of, if we're fully human, then we're just imperfect, it's messy, we're learning as we go. How do we have grace for one another, grace for ourselves in that process, and especially with little to big people and all the things that they're figuring out, but also for grown-ups in their parenting journey. It's quite a process, and always helping parents just know that, like, this is the journey and our sanctification, just the whole process.
Yeah. I think what's interesting in both your answers is not even necessarily what you said, but what you didn't say. Notice neither one of you mentioned college or career readiness. As far as what's the outcome, what's the goal, what's the outcome of a classical Christian education. And that's always interesting. And I think in the same way of what I was saying before, where we have to kind of go back before we go forward. As a parent, I get that. You get that. If I'm going to invest in my child in this way, I want to make sure that they will be successful. And I want that guarantee, right? We all do. But I think in that same way, we have to ask ourselves, well, what do we mean by success? Is it about that college, and is it about that job? Because even if we just were to, run it back, what if they did get into whatever is that in your mind, get into that college, or what if they did get that job, but they were just a big fat jerk?
Oh yeah.
Who didn't know or love Christ or his neighbor, or live in such a way that he would honor the Lord with his life. Is that what you?
Yeah.
I don't want that. I don't want that for my son. I don't want that for either one of my sons, as far as who they are and what they're doing. The Lord, I have no idea what the Lord will call them to. I have no idea even as they're growing, the passions and giftings and abilities and interests and all of that type of stuff, that's still to be determined.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that they know Christ, and yes, that they know about his world, and that that they, as you were saying, Liz, they are a learned person. But man, who they are is way more important than what they know.
Well, and I was just going to say, this whole process, like the classical model and what the students work through in their journey, it's not for the faint at heart. It is challenging, very challenging at times, and how we navigate that in partnership with parents and children. But if we're going to be fully human or like him, then he was humble. And this process and as learning and all that, it should cause us to grow in humility. Yeah. As we learn, we don't know everything, and we're not, hopefully it helps us grow in humility. And that's for everyone, parents, all of us, faculty, staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This idea that, what you're pointing out, Matt, and you too, Liz, is that our culture is very, very utilitarian and pragmatic about education right now. It was looking for the job and the paycheck and all of that. But when you aim at formation of a human being full of virtue, wisdom, holiness, the skill that's imparted by the study of the liberal arts and great books and the natural sciences, by aiming at that, a good job comes along with it. It's just naturally going to be.
Natural byproduct.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a natural byproduct. You get it by not aiming at it. You aim past it.
Yeah. No.
Yes.
So, and I know you have stories like this from your own graduates. I'm thinking of one person I know who graduated from our school, K through 12, always loved the camera, always playing with the camera, went to a Christian college and studied philosophy, but is now a documentary filmmaker. These students are equipped through a liberal education, a liberating education, to do all kinds of things. So it's a good question when parents ask it. Like, it's not a question that, Matt, you were alluding to this. It's not a question that's out of bounds to be wanting your child to be successful or get a good higher education. But it's not the ultimate question.
Yeah.
So I think shooting past it is kind of what we say, And then, the good soil report that the ACCS did about 5 or 7 years ago now, we did a study of classical Christian school graduates. They do fine. So they do fine. They do better than anybody else on the SAT. So what I like to say when the parent comes in with that pragmatic question first is say, it's not a bad question. It's a secondary question. It's not the primary one, but it's still a good question. And let me just answer it for you. Your child is going to be the best prepared student in this area when it comes to college readiness, potential vocations, SAT scores. That's just already proven because this curriculum does that. So let's just check that box, shall we? And now talk about the things that matter even more. So that's one way to answer. But by saying we want to form students skilled in the liberal arts, who become virtuous and wise and holy, and who are ready to serve God and neighbor, you could argue that includes college readiness and job readiness, right? If you're prepared for any good work, if you've learned how to learn, you're going to be in good shape. So I think you put it rightly by saying it's not an out of bounds question. Yeah. It's just not the primary question.
Yeah. No, that's a good way of saying it. Well, I think practically too, we're talking about some pragmatics and even some comparisons. I think anyone listening could infer some of these things, but let's be explicit here. If you went to a classical Christian school, obviously every classical Christian school is going to have its own culture and feel in its own right. But your typical classical Christian school, what might look the same and what might look different from, say, what someone is used to in school in our modern American culture? Meaning, I think sometimes when I try to explain to someone who's never heard of classical education and I work at a classical school, they're like, are you guys wearing robes? Like, what do you know, like
Harry Potter?
Is everyone just wandering around? What? I'm trying to understand what you're explaining because sometimes, you get into these things. And so I think even, again, from a practical standpoint, what might look the same? When you come here, you go, okay, this is school. Like, I understand the basic premise of some of this. And again, maybe we've already exhausted this, but on some level, what would look different? What would be some of the easily observable things,
Sure.
I guess is a good way of putting it.
Well, some of those kinds of things, you definitely more and more would see houses or something similar in how high schoolers are, or even junior high, are split up into various teams and communities. Again, going back to community, you would see formal logic, you would see the great books, curriculum in these classical Christian schools, Latin, senior thesis. It's so funny. I hope Lily will be okay with this, sharing a short anecdote. She is at Wheaton.
I think because it's your daughter, if you mention her on a podcast, you owe her money.
Okay.
I think that's how it goes, right?
Yes. Our youngest is at Wheaton, right? And she's actually in their honors program in classics and politics, philosophy, and English major. But she has met a young man, and we went to breakfast when we were visiting her, and both of them were talking about their senior thesis. And that he had a senior thesis. His school in Texas he was a captain of his house, and a variety of things like that. So what was interesting, though, was their capacity and similarities to talk about, the things of substance. So those would be some of the things. Chris, I'm sure you have some things as well.
It's a great question and it's a question that parents have. How are we alike? How are we different? Well, we are alike in many ways. There's teaching and learning going on. There's a teacher in front of the class who has authority. There are classrooms. There's a lunch period. There are athletic teams. These are things that we share. There might be a mock trial team. There might be a debate team. There may be some other things that are more often present in a classical school than your average, say, public school or even Christian school. But we have grades. We do grading. We have standardized tests. We have LD, learning disability, special education programs, and sometimes we have psychological evaluations that are done of students. some of these things come from modern education. The advent of psychology and educational psychology and how it's deployed, cognitive science and its discoveries. These are new things, historically, culturally. And progressive educators have made a lot of hay out of them and may use some of these disciplines differently than we do. But there are some things that we pay attention to. Mental testing, aptitude testing, norms, and so forth. I think can be an appropriate deployment of the quadrivium. There are some things about how students learn and perform that can be measured. But there are some things that cannot be, and it can be overdone and done to an extreme such that everything is being quantified and nothing's really being qualified. So these become differences of degree. The fact that we have grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, this is a result of a historical mass immigration starting in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Schools before that time didn't always group by grades, but it's okay if done well. We have classrooms with with whiteboards and things that look very normal, but the pedagogy begins to differ rapidly, significantly. We don't do like 90% project-based learning, which is typical in progress. We don't differentiate as much as we possibly can to every student. We don't put students on their own differentiated academic plans. The teacher in a classical school does have authority. The teacher is not just a mere facilitator of a child-centered curriculum in which the student gets to kind of choose the pace and even the content of what he or she studies, which you will find in a lot of progressive schools, even in some Christian schools. We believe in the reality of the true, the good, and the beautiful as being authored by God, and we seek them and we find them. We believe that just affects pedagogy. So we do study grammar. we study real grammar, and that's just so. Curricularly and pedagogically is where you start seeing a lot of the more significant differences. But then culturally, I think you'll see what you've already alluded to: a living curriculum of faculty who view their students as fellow seekers and who view themselves as fellow students still learning and modeling that, so that there's a kind of common shared investigation and seeking after and finding the true, the good, and the beautiful. That academic friendship, an appropriate friendship, kind of an older to younger academic intellectual friendship that you especially see around middle school and high school, sets classical Christian schools apart in a significant way.
Yeah.
Having discussions around a text where the text has authority and where you're seeking to conform yourselves and learn from, say, Plato or Augustine. Those things are not usually found in other schools that aren't classical. So I would do, if I had the time, I would, this would not be very rhetorically effective with your typical parent, but maybe among educators, you could put two overlapping circles on a whiteboard, and you could put the classical school and the local Christian school will probably share more when you overlap. There'll probably be like a Venn diagram. There'll be more things in the middle that they both share than in the public school, but there'll be some things that are different from a classical school, a classical Christian school, and a Christian school. There'll be even less overlap, but still some, between a classical Christian school and a public school.
Yeah.
And then you start teasing what those things are. But the way I've just described it, not too rhetorically effective. Not what I would share, with that mom coming in. I hope I would be terser and more pithy.
Yeah.
But those are the things that come to my mind. How do you do it? Like when a parent comes to, and Matt says you work with, parents coming into the grammar school, and you probably can't give a long answer like I just gave. How do you talk about the differences?
I think one of the things that always has impressed me, not only as a dad, but also as an educator, I do tell people, you come here, it's going to feel like school. It's going to look like school. There are going to be kids in the hallway. We have recess, all those things. In that sense, from a 30,000 foot view, it's going to look like school life. It's not going to feel so odd. But like anything, the more time you spend there, you're going to notice things that are hopefully different, intentionally different and unique. Curricularly, how our students behave, expectations we have of them, uniforms, a lot of those things are going to look different. To me, one of the things that really sets classical Christian education apart is a fundamental understanding of subjects being inextricably tied together. And knowing that as a student, we enjoy learning that way. So when you're in third grade learning about the Greeks and Romans, I'm not just going to learn about that in history, but I'm going to see connectedness to Scripture. And then I'm also going to go to art class and we're going to learn about Greco-Roman art and history, right? Because you're not just studying some abstract idea, you're studying a culture and a people. And then, then you're going to have for us, you're going to have a Greek wax museum where you get to be a Greek god or goddess and memorize a speech and embody that. We're going to have Roman games where we're going to do gladiator fights and we're going to have chariot races, right? But this is an embodiment of that curriculum that you're going to, as much as you can in a school context, you're going to live it. And as a result, I think that will be so much more, not only just fun and exciting and enjoyable, but transformational too, that a child's going to just remember that. I could probably go ask some of our rhetoric school students right now who have been here a long time, which Greek god or goddess were you in third grade? And they would know, and they might even be able to say some of their speech still, right?
Yes.
It's a lasting education. It's one where they actually get to dive in and enjoy those things. And so I think to me, that is, if we're talking about a feature, that's one of the things that definitely sets it apart. But also just, dispelling the fears, if you will, of sometimes where you're like, is this going to be so weird? You're like, no, it's weird. But the weirdness is intentional. Like the places we're choosing to be different is truly on purpose in as far as what we're doing. But again, I think the way I would say it is the more time you spend there, I would hope that you see and experience that it's just not, it might look the same, but it's really not.
Well, and also how this whole process and the model itself as it relates to what happens for our students in the grammar stage when they're covering Genesis and the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans and what they're covering, then how the cycle repeats itself as we go back into 7th through 12th grade, and they're able to see those connections, or the scaffolding has already been started
a little more
to be laid,
right,
with those foundations and or ideas. And I have the privilege of teaching our honors government class to 12th grade, because that's right where they are as it relates to what they've covered again in history. And then, of course, they do that and apologetics the second semester, or it flips. But then one of the things we always do is make sure we pop over to the Founding Fathers Museum in 5th grade, because a lot of them remember being founding father in 5th grade, and just the whole
that museum
process, the museum, how they make the connections, but and are able to, like I said, they have been given the scaffolding for where and how these ideas are connected for them. Yeah.
You both have kind of said this, but and I don't mean to, again, be overly exhaustive, but in the same way where how I think we've kind of looked at how classical Christian education differs from modern education, but to go back to that Venn diagram, if in like kind of a succinct way, how would you articulate the difference of a classical Christian education to your typical Christian school, right? Because obviously, as you said, there's going to be some more overlap, but what are those things that are going to set a student who's in a classical Christian school apart?
Yeah, it's interesting, and if you threw in, to make it a three-way comparison, you could throw in a classical school that's not Christian.
Yes.
And then you would see a different kind of overlap and shared elements. The Christian school would share with a Christian classical school a commitment to the authority of Scripture and Christ overall, a culture that in a good Christian school, and there's one in our area it's a good Christian school It's not classical, but interestingly, it's becoming quasi-classical. It's like just maybe it's because of competition, but as classical Christians are getting more well-known, some Christian schools are looking at it and saying, well, teaching logic was probably a good thing. And whether or not we go all in with the classical model, we're going to start teaching logic. Or a Christian school might be saying, we like this idea of a humane letters seminar and integrating history and literature more than we have. Or they might even look at what you've just described as lining up the study of Scripture, a historical period, and art and integrating them. Christian schools can integrate that way too and not be fully classical. So you're just seeing a lot of different ways that there are similarities and differences. It's changing, and it's not schools don't always neatly fit into a predetermined model. So, in your own region, as you know the schools around you, you've probably done that analysis. You might find that there's a Christian school there in Santa Clarita that, over the years they've become maybe in some ways more like Trinity rather than less like Trinity. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they've become more unlike you. So, but what you would normally find, of course, is that Christian element. But sometimes you'll find a Christian school that has a chapel service, they teach Bible, but the program is otherwise very progressive. Mm-hmm. Project-based learning, child-centered approach, heavily differentiated, very light on discipline. Teachers don't have the kind of authority in the classroom that you might have in a school like Trinity. An over-reliance on grades and a pragmatic approach to getting students ready for college, and not a focus on formation, and not a focus on the study of the liberal arts. So those schools, and some of them can be pretty good at doing that, and some of them can be bad. There are, and of course, this can be true of a classical Christian school theoretically, right? You could have a bad classical Christian school, but I've seen Christian schools that are Christian more or less in name. So you have to, just like, every school website says something almost like this, and this would be true of almost every Christian school website. We offer Christ-centered teaching in a warm academic environment with loving teachers. They all say that.
Do you package that and sell it to those schools?
It's just
for the one low price.
Right. So parents so when you're hearing that all the time, the parent is wanting to come visit and see what that really means.
What does that mean? What does that look like? What does that feel like?
That's right.
Here. Yeah.
So I think the analysis has to be done kind of school by school to, if you're in a region, if you have a couple of Christian schools in the Santa Clarita area, you probably know them pretty well because you don't just read the tagline on the website and think that's sufficient for you to make a distinction.
Yeah.
So there's levels of description that have to be done regionally, but those would be the general ways that I would look it over. And let me make one more comment about classical schools that are not Christian. They just vary. In my experience, they vary widely. There are some that I wouldn't touch. I remember visiting one classical school, classical charter school, and it needed to be. It almost got shut down. There was a lot of problems at that school. And it was quite secular. And then I visited other charter schools where 90% of the faculty are believers and where there is a pastor walking through the halls because he teaches a course there, and where in the auditorium that they rent out, there are church banners saying Christ to all nations because they rent out their auditorium to a church. And the admin team are all Christians. And it's like, it's not Christian from a legal perspective,
but practically.
But from the perspective of the people, you'd have to say this is a Christian school to a significant degree. Well, we have to make distinctions there too. They obviously can't proclaim Christ from the lectern and so forth. So it's just like we have to be careful in this moment not to generalize, because you can have a Christian school that's quite secular and progressive, and you can have a charter school that in many ways is quite Christian and not progressive.
Yeah.
So on a case-by-case basis, regionally, I would encourage parents and administrators to look at each school.
Yeah. I think I have to ask one, in your experience and what you've seen, a common misconception, I believe, of classical Christian schools is almost the sense where some parents go, oh, okay, I kind of, as they maybe start to understand a little more, they look at it and go, I kind of get where you're going at, but do you guys even care about math and science? Like, is that even, you really care about the humanities, right? I get that. That's a strong suit of yours, but you really don't you really don't care about math and science or STEM or STEAM. What's your response there? What's your response to the person who wonders or questions if we even care about math or science?
Yes, and we do get that question. And math and science, of course, being a significant part of what our students, as we approach the fully human and understanding who God is in his creation, and how that influences what we think and how we think, is very much a part of a Christian classical education. Mm-hmm. And to the point of when we look at our scope and sequence and the pedagogy of how we're going about it, it's very systematic in when we are doing the certain skills for the next level, for what the building blocks, so that they are able to grow and learn in those areas. And what you were referencing, what we were speaking about earlier, related to helping our students how to learn and how to think, they're able to do that in the context of what we're doing. And of course, that helps them through what we are doing in math and science, all the way through AP chemistry and advanced biology and obviously AP and BC calculus, for depending upon the student's capacity, right, mm-hmm. in their growth. And it's so funny because when you look at even statistically other classical Christian schools and some of what's happening to their alumni and our own anecdotally, we have in every class, say, that is going on to the next, say if they're going on to university, and again, most of our students do, as an option. They are choosing engineering or medical. And also in my government class, I'm finding I have a few this semester that are no in their mind. They love the law, So there is that misconception, and I don't know if it's something we're recovering from years prior in this movement of classical Christian education, but it is so much a part of just the whole person and their learning and their education.
I've seen the same things Liz has. Sometimes over half of our graduates are going into the fields of science and engineering. So the classical curriculum is word and number. So the quadrivial arts and the natural sciences, you need word and number to do a science. And so together, the trivium, the quadrivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, mathematics, arithmetic, astronomy, geometry, music, they all prepare mm-hmm. students for natural sciences and for a career of any kind. So what we see is that, we would love to see engineers, doctors, scientists, researchers who have received a great liberal education, because they'll be better at what they do. And our graduates bear that out. The Good Soil report done by the ACCS shows that too. So again, if a parent came in with that question, I would say, good question, yes. In high numbers, our students are going into natural sciences. Yeah, many of them go into the typical professions, law, medicine, ministry, graduate study. But many of them are also going into business. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's some sharp students that you have that are going to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
Yes,
already.
very much so.
No, we interviewed on this podcast a while back that we could link to in the show notes. But one of our graduates, he is an entrepreneur and in an engineering context.
Yes.
He's actually married both of those worlds. He's developing, he was telling me about it and showing me video of kitchen tools.
Yes.
Like AI
Marcus.
robotic kitchen tools that like will do manual chopping, like just some fascinating stuff. It was amazing to me to even see it. And I was like, wow, you're right. There probably is going to be a market for that.
And it's interesting, that young man in particular was, from our second graduating class and definitely in our early days, and truly not knowing fully what we were doing on some level. But he just, in the context of even when he was here, all those things were happening for him so he could pursue what was next.
Yeah. I find the fascinating thing too, what I've experienced is, first and foremost, those who have gone into engineering fields, what they have commonly conveyed to me is, whether them or their parents, that having received this type of education, having actually had that as a part of their educational process and everything that they've learned, because of
Yes.
That's so true.
And then the other piece, I think, oftentimes in the same way, Chris, that you were talking about, parents, and I'm guilty of this too. Parents will come and we like what we see, and we like what we're used to. So when they talk about, well, you guys do science in kindergarten, it's like, well, yes, but it may not be with Bunsen burners and beakers and AI robots. It might not look at that, because as I talk to even our rhetoric school science teachers, if I said, when we're looking at science curriculum, what does a kindergarten need to be good at when it comes to science? They go, you know what kids aren't good at today because of the culture and world we live in and technology and screens and all these things? They're not good at observing things.
Observation, absolutely.
So maybe we should go outside and look at leaves or bugs.
And touch them and feel them.
And
yes.
And how for them to actually have that ability to pause and think and wonder at something and all of that. They're like, if I can receive a student in 9th grade who is good at that and interested in that, oh man, that will set them apart. And those are things I never even thought of in that way, where again, sometimes we like the flashy, shiny, robot or whatever. Yeah, but where did that start? It started from a genuine curiosity, a genuine ability to observe things and notice differences and intricacies, and that's one of the foundational pieces of understanding science and what a good scientist would do.
You're touching on like cultivating these academic virtues. Sometimes they're called intellectual virtues. One of them is attention, contemplation, and there's a school, like I know one school discovered, and by the way, Ravi Jain has written about this in his book New Natural Philosophy, along with Robbie Andreessen and Christopher Hall. And then Christopher Hall wrote a book called Common Arts Education, and he's all over this. And what some of these classical teachers have done is they've started to, and you may do the same thing, they've implemented attention-like exercises in nature study in the lower school primarily by teaching students to draw. So it's an integration of the art of drawing and observing. You mentioned a leaf. And so they teach students through their drawing exercise. If you're going to teach them to draw, have them, as part of what they do, to attend and draw beetles and bugs and flowers and leaves and trees. And this comes from the tradition, but Josef Pieper articulates this in one of his essays. He says that everybody should learn to draw because drawing enables you to see. And so it's when you draw that you put your eye and then your mind in a different kind of posture, just as you were pointing out. So, and this is the Geneva School of Orlando. All the students are carrying around little sketchbooks, and a part of their natural science curriculum is drawing what they see, for the same reasons you mentioned.
Well, I know we could go on forever, and there's much to. I mean, as we've said, it's a whole world to explore. But I think as we finish our time, my last question is this: from your perspective, and again from your experience and what you've seen, where will the products of a classical Christian education, meaning the students, where will they excel in the long run in life over maybe their peers that have received a different type of education? What will as time goes on, what will set them apart?
This reminds me of a book by Tony Wagner called The Global Achievement Gap. Education professor at Harvard did an inductive study asking business leaders, military leaders, government leaders, what skills do they want to see in people so they would thrive in those major domains. And he, after exhaustive study, after a few years, he has a list of 7, he calls them survival skills. And they include something like this: effective oral and written communication, the ability to collaborate, the ability to integrate across domains. And he himself says at the end, or somewhere in this book, he says, these are all the fruits of a liberal arts curriculum. He said that. He's not kind of in our renewal, but he saw the irony there. He knew enough about education to see that the liberal arts curriculum provides you with these skills. So the answer to your question apparently is, in almost every way, these students should be able to thrive and in various ways be innovative, creative, entrepreneurial, and dare I say, superior to their peers who have not received this kind of education. Now, I'm generalizing.
Yeah.
There's always the black sheep. There's always the students who go through our schools who crash and burn. We all know of those stories. But they're far less than what we see in typical, for graduates from typical Christian schools. We saw that in again, I'm referring to the Good Soil Report. When they did that report, Notre Dame did the study. They had a question for all of these graduates from classical Christian schools, Catholic schools, independent schools, home schools. One of the questions was expecting a divorce rate. Right, students. There's a certain number of our graduates are going to get married and they're going to divorce. Sadly, the instrument, the test, expected at least one divorce. What was surprising to these test givers is that there wasn't a single divorce among all of the 1,000 graduates of classical Christian schools that was interviewed. Now, I'm sure there are some divorces out there among our graduates, but isn't that amazing? So it's just like, if you go back to that Good Soil Report, you're going to see some remarkably good news.
Yeah.
But in the midst of that, I think still remarkable good news, there are a fair number of tragic stories, bad stories too. So let's not generalize, but it's good news, and I would say that to a parent. I can't guarantee you that you're coming through this school, your child's going to be a holy person and do remarkable stuff, but on average, our graduates are doing really well compared to the average.
I do think for us, because for our particular school, what I hear from our graduates when they come back and be with us, or we're doing different alumni events or those types of things, or even my own children, I have a feeling it's the same kind of impact at other classical Christian schools. They have a capacity about them that, especially if they've gone to university, that some of their peers don't seem to have when it comes to possibly a work ethic or realizing, oh, I can learn about that. I don't have to be afraid. I'm going to try. They also have a relational capacity, and we do, again, because schools like ours are about community and engaging and participating. So they know that, and especially again if they've gone to university, they know they need to go initiate with their professor, and the professors are like, who is this kid talking to me like this? When it's like that. Or they also know how to build community and what to look for in community. So when I look at, again, our students and now and the ones graduating, like they seem to again have a sense for what that means to pursue the good things in life as it relates to the things that matter. Again, not all perfectly or all of them, but I don't know. There's something different, and it's an intangible, but it's real.
Yeah.
And it's hopeful. It is hopeful. I am telling you, it is hopeful. And this type of education, if I were to say, as we wrap this up, produces hope.
Yeah. No, I agree. I've had the privilege of having conversations with university professors and even in Christian contexts. And the best way even I've had a university professor explain their students who they know are products of a classical Christian education is they say, there's just something different about them. There's just something different. They work harder. They observe things. They pick up on stuff. They turn in quality work. There's just something different about them. And really, and I know for both of you for many years, but it's a joy that the Lord allows us to even be a small part of that process in our students. So with that being said, thank you both for your time. Thank you both for engaging in this. And again, as we started, I hope and I pray that this is helpful for someone who is looking at or thinking through this type of education for their child, because what I think we all can attest to is it not only will change them, but there's a good chance it will change you too.
Yes.
So
thank you.
So Chris, Liz,
Thanks,
thank you.
Dr. D.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Different by Design. To learn more about Trinity Classical Academy, visit us at trinityclassicalacademy.com. And for more information about our approach to classical Christian education, be sure to check out the conversations over at the Classical Academy podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and share. Until next time.